Medieval England was a land of stark contrasts, where towering castles overlooked humble cottages, and privilege or poverty often depended solely on the accident of birth. The rigid hierarchy defined every aspect of life, from the clothes one wore to the food one ate, shaping destinies before they were even imagined. In this world, the upper class ruled with wealth and influence, the middle class navigated trade and ambition, and the poor labored to keep the realm functioning. Daily life varied dramatically between these groups, yet all were bound together by shared traditions, religion, and the ever-changing rhythms of the seasons. The medieval countryside hummed with the work of peasants and serfs, who toiled from sunrise to sunset, their lives tied to the land they did not own. In bustling towns, merchants and skilled craftsmen forged a growing middle class, forming guilds to protect their trade and improve their status in a rigid society. High above them in rank, the nobility enjoyed banquets, political influence, and finely woven fabrics, but also faced the constant threat of war and political intrigue. The church loomed large over every class, dictating moral laws, guiding education, and serving as the center of spiritual life and community gatherings. For the wealthy, life meant managing estates, attending court, and displaying their status through grand architecture and elaborate ceremonies meant to impress and intimidate. For the poor, survival required hard labor, cooperation within the village, and enduring the uncertainty of harvests that could make or break their existence. The middle class straddled these worlds, seeking opportunity through trade, education, and the slow but steady growth of England's towns and markets. Despite the divisions, moments of unity emerged in festivals, fairs, and religious celebrations when rich and poor mingled, if only briefly, as equals in spirit. Children grew into the roles society expected, learning trades, manners, or survival skills based on their family's position and prospects within the social order. Law and order varied by class. A noble's dispute might be settled by royal court, while a peasant's fate could be decided by the local lord. Food, too, reflected status. Where nobles dined on roasted game and imported spices, the poor made do with pottage, bread, and whatever the fields and gardens provided. Clothing acted as a silent marker of class, with sumptuary laws enforcing strict rules on who could wear certain fabrics, colors, and adornments. Travel was rare for most, though the wealthy might journey for politics, pilgrimage, or pleasure, while traders and peddlers carried goods and news between distant places. Disease, famine, and war cut across all social boundaries, though the poorest bore the brunt, lacking the resources to shield themselves from hardship. Yet, through all the inequality, a shared sense of belonging to England, its traditions, its faith, its history, united its people in ways that defied class lines. The upper class of medieval England was defined by birthright, vast estates, and political influence. Lords and ladies stood at the very top of the kingdom's rigid hierarchy. Their wealth came from land ownership, with peasants and tenants working fields that funded noble lifestyles. Land was not just property, it was the foundation of power. Great stone castles rose as both fortresses and symbols of dominance, serving as homes, administrative centers, and military strongholds for the ruling elite. Life for the nobility blended privilege with responsibility. They oversaw justice, collected rents, and ensured loyalty among those living and working under their protection. Daily routines included hosting lavish feasts, entertaining visiting dignitaries, and engaging in political negotiations that could shift the balance of regional or national power. Education for noble children focused on leadership skills, courtly manners, and military training for boys, while girls learned management of households and the art of alliances through marriage. Leisure often meant hunting, hawking, or attending tournaments, where knights competed for prestige while showcasing the might of their lords. Clothing was rich in color and texture, with velvets, silks, and furs signaling wealth. Sumptuary laws ensured only certain ranks could wear specific fabrics and styles. The church played an influential role in noble life, guiding morality while reinforcing the belief that their authority was divinely ordained. Despite their privilege, nobles faced constant threats. Rival claims, rebellions, and the shifting tides of royal favor could strip a family of its wealth and influence. Marriage was a political tool, forging alliances between powerful families and strengthening claims to land or titles across England and beyond. Servants, stewards, and retainers formed the backbone of noble households, ensuring that daily life ran smoothly while reinforcing the lord or lady's elevated status. Castles were centers of culture as well as defense, hosting musicians, poets, and artists whose work reflected the values and pride of their patrons. Nobles also acted as patrons of the church, funding chapels, monasteries, and religious festivals that enhanced their reputation and demonstrated piety. Diplomacy was a key skill, whether managing disputes between neighbors, negotiating trade agreements, or serving as an intermediary for the crown. The noble code of chivalry promoted ideals of honor, loyalty, and service, though real politics often proved more ruthless than the romanticized knightly image. During wartime, nobles were expected to supply troops, lead in battle, and defend their lands from both foreign enemies and internal unrest. Inheritance laws ensured titles and property passed to heirs, but disputes could spark family feuds that lasted generations, shaping regional politics for decades. The upper class, with its wealth, influence, and visibility, defined much of medieval England's political and cultural life, leaving a legacy still visible in the country's castles and traditions. The vast majority of medieval England's population lived as peasants, bound to the land and working tirelessly to survive in a demanding and unforgiving world. Most poor families worked as serfs, tied to a lord's estate, owing labor, rent, and a portion of their harvest in exchange for protection and shelter. Life revolved around the agricultural calendar, with planting, tending, and harvesting dictating the rhythm of each year. Houses were small, often one-room structures of wattle and daub, with thatched roofs and earthen floors. Meals were simple: coarse bread, pottage, seasonal vegetables, and occasionally meat from small animals or hunting. Illness was constant, as poor sanitation, unclean water, and limited medical knowledge made disease an ever-present threat. Children began working at a young age, assisting in fields, tending animals, or learning basic household tasks. Most peasants owned few possessions, with clothing patched and repurposed until it could no longer be worn. Religion offered hope and structure, with church services marking holy days, feasts, and the passing of the seasons. Taxes were a heavy burden, with tithes to the church and dues to their lords often consuming much of a family's resources. During times of famine or crop failure, hunger could be severe, forcing desperate measures to survive. Community ties were strong, with neighbors helping each other during sickness or shortages, knowing mutual aid was essential. Serfs had little chance for social mobility, though some could purchase freedom or move to towns in search of better work. Seasonal fairs offered rare moments of leisure, entertainment, and the chance to trade small goods for necessary supplies. Peasants maintained small gardens, raising herbs, vegetables, and sometimes chickens for eggs. The workday was long and physically demanding, beginning at dawn and ending at sunset. Manorial courts controlled much of peasant life, settling disputes and enforcing local rules. Harsh punishments awaited those who resisted their obligations or were caught stealing from the Lord's land. Weather played a decisive role, with floods, droughts, or harsh winters threatening survival. During harvest, entire villages labored together to gather crops quickly before the weather turned. Peasant women contributed equally to survival, working in fields, tending livestock, and managing household duties. Children's games often imitated adult work, preparing them for future responsibilities. Despite hardships, oral traditions, songs, and storytelling brought small joys to village life. Feasts after a good harvest were treasured, with music, dancing, and shared food. Wool production became a vital part of rural economies, with many peasants spinning or weaving for extra income. Obligations to the church were met not only through tithes, but also through labor for church lands. Some peasants served as soldiers in times of war, hoping for payment or rewards. The poor of medieval England lived lives defined by labor, resilience, and a fragile balance between survival and scarcity. Through their toil, they sustained the very foundations of the medieval world, though history rarely recorded their names. Medieval England's economy and daily life revolved around work, with occupations shaped by class, location, and the needs of both rural villages and bustling towns. In the countryside, farming dominated, with peasants cultivating grain, tending livestock, and managing seasonal tasks essential to survival and feudal obligations. Blacksmiths were indispensable, forging tools, nails, horseshoes, and weapons, making them vital to both agricultural and military life. Carpenters crafted everything from furniture and wagons to the wooden frames of homes and bridges, their skill essential in every community. Millers' work powered the economy, grinding grain into flour using water or wind-driven mills, a cornerstone of both diet and trade. In market towns, merchants bought and sold goods ranging from local produce to luxury items imported from distant lands. Tanners transformed animal hides into leather, supplying material for clothing, saddles, belts, and armor, though their work was smelly and often set apart from towns. Tailors and seamstresses created and repaired garments, serving both wealthy patrons with fine fabrics and peasants needing durable workwear. Fishermen supplied fresh and preserved fish, a vital source of protein, especially on days when religious fasting prohibited meat. Bakers rose before dawn to produce bread, a staple food for every household in the realm. Stonemasons were highly respected, building churches, cathedrals, bridges, and castles that still stand as monuments to medieval craftsmanship. Glassmakers produced stained glass for churches and finer homes, adding color and artistry to medieval interiors. Apothecaries sold herbal remedies, spices, and rare imported goods, blending trade with the era's limited understanding of medicine. Minstrels and entertainers traveled between towns, performing songs, stories, and plays that brought joy to medieval audiences. In noble households, stewards managed estates, overseeing finances, labor, and the smooth running of the lord's affairs. Clerks handled records, contracts, and letters, serving both in noble courts and within the expanding administration of the church. Monks and nuns worked in scriptoria, painstakingly copying manuscripts and preserving knowledge in an age before printing. Craft guilds began to emerge, regulating training, quality, and prices in trades like weaving, metalwork, and brewing. Apprenticeships offered young men a path into skilled trades, though the years of training were long and poorly paid. Water carriers and laborers performed hard, unskilled work for low pay, often moving between jobs as demand shifted. Shepherds tended flocks in the open fields, their work critical to England's growing wool trade. Innkeepers provided food and lodging to travelers, merchants, and pilgrims journeying along England's roads. Pilgrimage routes created work for guides, souvenir sellers, and those offering hospitality to the faithful. Seasonal work brought extra income, with laborers joining harvests or construction projects when demand was high. Market days were lively events, where sellers of meat, bread, cloth, and tools competed for the attention of buyers. Some occupations were dangerous, such as mining tin or iron, where accidents and poor air were constant threats. Others, like brewing ale, offered steady local income and were often managed by women. Through this diverse web of occupations, medieval England's society functioned, each role, no matter how humble, contributing to the survival and growth of the realm. Work defined identity, purpose, and opportunity, shaping the rhythm of life from the humblest peasant to the wealthiest merchant. Religion was at the heart of medieval England, influencing politics, daily life, education, and even the agricultural calendar through holy days and festivals. The Catholic Church was the central institution, with the Pope in Rome holding spiritual authority over England's clergy and believers. Every village had its parish church, a focal point for worship, community meetings, and local events. Monasteries and abbeys dotted the countryside, centers of prayer, learning, charity, and sometimes impressive wealth. The clergy ranged from humble parish priests to powerful bishops who influenced both religious and political decisions. Church services were conducted in Latin, a language most laypeople could not understand, emphasizing the priest's role as spiritual mediator. Tithes, mandatory offerings of 1/10 of a person's produce or income, were collected to support the church and its work. Religious festivals like Easter, Christmas, and saints' feast days punctuated the year with both sacred and social celebrations. Pilgrimages to holy sites, such as Canterbury, were acts of devotion, penance, and sometimes a chance for travel and trade. The Church taught that salvation depended on the sacraments, such as baptism, confession, and communion, all controlled by ordained clergy. Cathedrals served as both places of worship and symbols of the Church's power, built to inspire awe and devotion. Monks and nuns followed strict rules, dedicating their lives to prayer, study, and service to the poor and sick. Scriptoria in monasteries preserved ancient texts, ensuring the survival of religious and classical knowledge through careful manuscript copying. The Church also played a role in education, operating schools that trained future priests, clerks, and sometimes noble sons. Confession was central to spiritual life, offering believers the chance to repent and be absolved of sins. Relics, objects associated with saints, were venerated, believed to bring blessings, protection, and sometimes miraculous healing. The Church's courts handled matters like marriage, wills, and moral offenses, operating alongside the king's legal system. Conflict between church and crown sometimes erupted, as in the famous dispute between King Henry II and Archbishop Thomas Becket. Heresy or religious dissent was punished severely, with accused individuals facing excommunication or even execution. Sermons and mystery plays helped teach biblical stories to those who could not read. Church bells marked time, signaling prayers, work hours, and emergencies within the community. Guilds often had religious functions, sponsoring masses and processions in honor of their patron saints. Almsgiving was encouraged as a Christian duty, aiding the poor while seeking spiritual merit. The church owned vast tracts of land, making it one of the kingdom's wealthiest landholders. Its moral authority could rally people to causes, such as the Crusades, or condemn rulers who defied it. Religious art and stained glass illustrated biblical scenes, turning churches into visual storytelling spaces. Monastic hospitality welcomed travelers, pilgrims, and even the destitute, reinforcing the church's charitable image. In times of crisis, famine, plague, or war, people often turned to the church for hope and guidance. Religion was both a unifying force and a source of conflict, shaping medieval England's identity for centuries. Daily life in medieval England was shaped by work, religion, social status, and the rhythms of the seasons, creating a world both harsh and vibrant. Villages formed the backbone of rural life, where families worked together on fields, cared for animals, and maintained their homes. The home was simple: timber-framed structures with thatched roofs, shared by families and sometimes livestock, offering modest shelter from the elements. Meals were basic yet hearty, often consisting of bread, porridge, vegetables, and occasionally meat, fish, or dairy products. Children contributed to daily labor from a young age, learning skills necessary for survival and continuity of family trades. Clothing reflected status and occupation. Peasants wore wool and linen, merchants added dyed fabrics, and nobles displayed velvets, furs, and jewelry. Education was rare among the poor, but more common for middle-class children, often linked to trade, literacy, or religious instruction. Entertainment included music, dancing, storytelling, and seasonal festivals, which brought communities together in shared celebration and respite from labor. Games such as hoop rolling, stick and ball, and board games provided leisure for children and adults alike. Markets were social as well as commercial hubs, where gossip, news, and goods circulated freely among townspeople. Feasts celebrated religious festivals, harvests, weddings, and victories, bringing temporary luxury to the humble as well as the noble. Marriage and family defined social organization, with alliances sometimes strengthening social or economic ties between families or guilds. Religion infused daily routines, with prayers before meals, church attendance, and observance of holy days shaping time and behavior. Worship and communal gatherings created bonds that transcended class, even as social inequalities persisted. Crafts and trades were often practiced within households, with families producing tools, textiles, and other goods for home use or sale. Artisans displayed pride in skill, whether in weaving, metalwork, carpentry, or pottery, passing knowledge from parent to child. Seasonal cycles dictated work. Plowing, planting, harvesting, and storing supplies ensured survival through winter months. Illness and disease were constant threats, with remedies drawn from herbs, superstition, or religious practices. Music and instruments, from flutes to lutes, entertained both nobility and commoners, forming a rich cultural tapestry. Storytelling preserved history, legends, and moral lessons, often shared around fires in the long winter nights. Festivals and fairs were highlights of the year, mixing commerce, entertainment, and ritual, creating moments of joy amid toil. Travel, though limited for peasants, allowed merchants, pilgrims, and officials to explore broader regions, spreading ideas, goods, and news. Public punishment and law enforcement reflected social norms, with village courts and manorial authorities overseeing behavior and resolving disputes. Food preservation, like salting, smoking, or pickling, was essential for survival, particularly in lean months. Gardens provided herbs, vegetables, and flowers, supplementing diets and offering small pleasures to everyday life. Hunting and fishing were privileges of the upper class, but also necessary sources of protein for some peasants. Storytelling and religious drama offered moral guidance, entertainment, and communal identity, uniting classes through shared narratives. Clothing and ornamentation signaled rank, profession, or guild membership, making appearance a social language everyone understood. Work, faith, family, and community intertwined to define medieval culture, creating a world of order, ritual, and resilience across centuries. Despite hardships, medieval England's people fostered creativity, tradition, and community, leaving a legacy reflected in literature, architecture, and customs still visible today.